Greetings, dear listeners. This is Jonah Goldberg, host of the Remnant Podcast, brought to you by the Dispatch and Dispatch Media. We get a lot of requests for guests, some more doable than others, or some more reasonable than others, and some just scintillatingly, obviously required. And when Joe Biden announced, or at least that's what we were led to believe he announced. We don't actually know if it was him. But when it was announced under the signature of an auto pen from Joe Biden on Twitter that Joe Biden was leaving the race, I got inundated with text, tweets, DMs, smoke signals, ravens from King's Landing, all saying I must have A.B. Stoddard back on so she can do a victory lap, because she, long ago, I don't have the exact date in front of me, but we'll figure it out. We had her on here, and she was just like, there is no way the Democrats can run this old man again. And she got grief for it. I agreed with her. I got grief for it. Either grief because that was unfair to Joe Biden, which who gives a rat's ass, or because we were wrong. But AB deserves all praise and honor, and she's still one of my favorite people. She's now a writer over at the Bulwark, which is the sort of, it's the Gimbals to our Macy's in some ways. Not to get too Miracle on 34th Street on you, but AB, lovely to have you back, and lovely to see you.
It's wonderful to be with you, Jonah. And this is not a victory lap, but it's really fun to have this conversation again.
Yeah. Well, were you shocked, surprised, pleased, ecstatic? Were you like, well, of course they were going to do this? What was your mood when you actually heard the news?
Well, I was at the Montreal airport at gate 88, and about to come home from a lovely weekend in Quebec City, which I highly recommend.
I like QC a lot.
And really, absolutely charming.
Yeah.
And to talk about the weather there right now is just, I don't want to bum everyone out, but it's like, it's the place to go in July. They don't know humidity there. Anyway, it was absolutely lovely. And I had left on Thursday. And when I had been at National Airport on Thursday, I had read, like the rest of us did, that it was coming soon and Joe Biden was going to relent. But Friday and Saturday, we were told he was not going to. He had watched Trump at the Republican National Convention and was digging in for the long fight he felt that he must wage. And on Sunday morning in Politico, we had read reporting that Hunter Biden was coming into his own agency and expression and influence and guiding his father to fight people like President Obama, who had crapped all over him and left him out and boxed him out, and to stay in the race. And that was a nadir for me, because I really didn't want Joe Biden to go through what he went through starting on June 27th, which is why in July of 2022, I wrote my first of many columns saying that he should not run. It was untenable, because I wanted him to leave with dignity, and he did not. He extended it not only into 2023 and 2024, but I was looking at polling, just like you, Jonah. We were looking at polling where the voters were saying, he's too old. And it was the way he walked and talked. It was pre-debate, pre-brain freeze meltdown. It was just the way he walks and talks had disqualified him. So I didn't want it to be ugly, and I couldn't believe how ugly it got. I couldn't believe they let him debate. I couldn't believe that Jill Biden didn't seal up a hotel room in Atlanta the night of the debate and say, we're not leaving till we have written your speech, your exit speech, and we're going to preserve your dignity and your legacy. Instead, she took him to Waffle House and stormed through 1 million fundraisers in the Hamptons that weekend and pretended everything was fine. And the whole thing was surreal, as you know, to watch, as I'm sure you agree. And so I knew that at some point we all knew it was going to happen. But was he going to take another 2 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he and his family were so delusional. I thought it could be August 5th. I mean, it was just getting off the rails. So I don't know what finally pushed him, but it was just one of the most surreal things I've ever been through. Just to watch someone who I thought had really had his life scarred by fate and had enough humility to see the writing on the wall, but was instead, went into a real bunker of delusion.
So I think there's more reporting to be done about what actually put him over the top, because I've talked to a couple Democratic insiders, let's just leave it at that, or Biden camp people.
Right.
This is one of the great things about being at CNN now, is that you actually talk to people from the other side that you can get more insight into, because the sort of Fox News Democrats were always kind of like a couple steps removed, or always on guard in a way that, but anyway, and, the story that he just finally looked at some data and that's what convinced him. I haven't met anybody who actually believes that's the full story. And I'm not saying that wasn't part of it, but like the data that came in over the weekend was not so obvious, that obviously worse than the data they had seen for weeks prior, that it should have been, okay, now I believe it. If you're in denial, if you're doing that stage whisper saying, no poll says that, about polls that say you got to drop out, those Michigan numbers, or whatever, were not the ones that said, okay, now I believe it. I just think there's more to be said about it. I do wonder, and I don't want to, I don't want you to endanger your status in the feminist sorority here, but what do you think about Joe Biden's behavior? It feels kind of villainous to me, but I'm willing to be talked out of it.
I wrote about this right after the debate, so the Monday after the debate. I was stunned, absolutely stunned. My mother is 82 and told me a year or more ago that she was mad at Jill Biden.
Yeah.
Because the wife always knows the most, and that it was in her hands to give him the graceful end. And I said, Mom, come on, she seems like a nice woman, whatever. And I've just completely, I'm as horrified as anyone. I mean, I really believe, like I said, she could have nipped it in the bud that night. I think she shouldn't have let him debate. But that night she should have said, you're exiting this race with your help, we're going to find a way to hold your head up. We're going to orchestrate this, in an advantageous way for you and your legacy. But instead she just stormed around pretending that everything was fine, speaking at those fundraisers, saying that Joe Biden was the only one that could do the job. And what it said about their view of Harris, it said a lot. But it just, the Vogue cover and the family gatherings where they crapped on staff and threatened to fire them and blamed everybody else but themselves. It just so, in the end, I know that Joe has many copious moments. I've seen them since June 27th. But I put it on her. I really put it on her. So no, I think I saw this tweet from Meghan McCain. Like, I don't know if it was like, I don't know when it was in this shitstorm, okay, Jonah, but sometime in this last horrible timeline month, where she said history will not look kindly on Jill Biden. I thought that was a little harsh. I don't know if it was before the debate. I can't remember. And then that's really that's what I would say now.
Yeah.
That history will not look kindly on Jill Biden.
Yeah. I mean, the weird little like if you could get Hollywood to make nasty movies about Democrats, the fact that apparently it's true. Like, I was like, this can't be right. That the Biden White House instructed the Marine Corps band to come up with a new piece of music that was a hail to the chief for the first lady thing. That's just a bad sign,
Yeah.
That's like,
Yeah.
something's going on. Something a little Evita Peronish is going on there, and I also think I mean, we should talk about it in a little bit, but like the fact that this Cheadle woman, the head of the Secret Service, will not resign, and it was apparently a Jill Biden pick, and is also not a good sign. Like, she should be fired.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's not being fired, at some point the not being fired thing becomes the story in a weird way. And
Exactly.
and that too, I think you could Oliver Stone could do a lot with little tidbits like that in a biopic about Joe Biden. I mean, we were both old enough to remember, sadly, how Reagan and Nancy Reagan were treated, back in the day, and like how this isn't worse than what that was. I mean, I'm not trying to dance on Biden's political grave here, but like, it was kind of weird how the wagon circled for so long and then didn't.
Yeah. The one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in covering politics, which would have to be in the movie, was the day of the debate. There was an Axios report from Michelle Obama world. I think everybody who follows this stuff is aware that there's nothing tighter than Michelle Obama world and Barack Obama world. There are no leaks from the Obama teams ever.
Right.
And Axios had a piece on the day of the debate.
No unwanted leaks. What you mean?
Right.
Right.
An intended leak from Michelle Obama world that said, the reason Michelle Obama has not been helping the Bidens and she's pissed at them is because she's really good friends with Hunter's first wife, who has been crapped all over by Joe and Jill Biden, even though she's the mother of Hunter's kids. And it went into details about their friendship, and it was bad. And that, I read it after the debate. I found out about it later and found it. And I thought, these people have pissed off some people. And there's much more that we don't know, obviously.
Yeah, and there's also the Hunter things. Like, we were constantly told he has no influence in the administration. He has no influence on Joe. He's just a troubled son of a loving father. And I'm sure, I think he is a troubled son and he is a loving father. But like, post debate, it turned out that like Hunter was, Biden's consigliere. It's
Right.
like you can't have it both ways here.
Yeah. No, that was. I mean, I think that what happened in the way that I understand it is Biden melts down at the debate, and the family immediately wants to blame the staff for the way he was prepared for the debate. And obviously you can't over prepare someone who is prepared to debate.
Right.
You can over prepare an incapacitated person, but you can't, right?
Right.
I mean, the only person who's over prepared is like a 7-year-old, but the rest of us can't be, right? So that was crazy, and they wanted to blame the staff. And then the staff was like, okay, we're not going to take this one lying down after the way that, the family has tried to create this smaller circle and this protective shell and all this stuff. So they start leaking like wildfire about how Joe Biden has had these moments in other places and at other times. And then all of a sudden, in response to that, which is like a cry for help from inside the house, we get the elevation of Hunter. And he starts showing up at these meetings, and it's just they've made it so much worse than it had to be. It just, again, I just wish Joe Biden had never had that moment on stage, and that he had never had this end. I know it was hard for him to let go. I'm glad he did. Hunter's statement actually made me cry. I mean, in the end, the statement that Hunter put out about his dad after this was all over, it was really moving. They have a lot of pain in that family. And I'm really empathetic about that. But boy, did it get weird and dysfunctional. And I think it's really shitty to try to blame loyal staff who have worked so hard to make this a successful presidency. When we saw what we saw at that debate.
Yeah, I mean, like over preparation is a thing, Like, and for me, if I over prepare for something, it means I'm going to end up going way too weedy in some sort of
Right.
rabbit hole of intellectual history. It is not going to get me to say we finally beat Medicare in response to a question about abortion. I'm not going to.
And women are being raped by their sisters.
Yeah, yeah. Which, anyway, I agree. So like, there's something else going on there. All right. So not to get all weedy and rabbit holey, but like, this poli-sci shorthand, the party decides.
Yeah.
Right. And which I can never remember the name of the political scientist who came up with it. Doesn't really matter. It's the book, Party Decides. It's shorthand for how up until 2016, the basic argument was that the parties actually do have a lot of informal but real power, that they end up picking the candidates that the party wants and all that. And we don't have to get too deep in the weeds on it. But and then 2016, people said disproved the Party Decides thesis because Donald Trump came in and the party pretty much didn't want him, but he won anyway. And Bernie Sanders did some damage to that thesis on the Democratic side because he almost took over. And so now people have been saying the party decides is back. The Democratic, the party bosses in the Democratic Party did this. I've been trying to do all of these jokes about Pelosi ripping off from Godfather, where it's like, Dean Phillips is a pimp. He never could have outfought Joey. It was Pelosi all along. That kind of thing. And Pelosi clearly, played a big role in this. But like, I think this thesis kind of, this new conventional wisdom thing that's rapidly gelling in Washington misses the point that you were referring to either, which was that the voters had been yelling at the party for 2 years. Don't run this guy. Don't run this guy. And so like the party, when it had to have the debate performance to be slapped out of its denial about this, that the voters beat them there, were there a long time ago. And so like, again, this whole idea that this is a coup and elites did this and blah, 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 it misses the fact that this is actually, in a weird kind of ironic, informal way, very democratically responsive to where voters are.
Right. So you are right that that's why I thought that it would be untenable for him to be the candidate, the nominee, because the voters had made it so clear. And it is true. And it is true that the elites did not do this because they were late. The party decided late. Okay, so the party did a lot of damage to itself by risking getting really close to an election with Donald Trump that Biden was going to lose. But in the end, the party listened to the voters, not Biden, after the debate debacle, right? So we see polling that says, oh no, now Democrats are ready to heave him, and including, majority of Black Democrats, et cetera. And then majority saying he couldn't do the job. And then it was like, you've got to listen to the voters. So they came around and they did decide, and they did give him the heave ho, and the party decided, and then the party decided it had to be Kamala. The party decided that she couldn't be bypassed. So yes, right now the Democratic Party obviously looks like it's more functioning than it's been in a while, but they did decide against Bernie in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And they did decide against Bernie in 2016.
Yeah.
So it's, I think that you and I have had many conversations about the weakening of the parties, and they've really fallen apart because they have no leverage because they don't control the money. And that's a big change, and that hasn't snapped back. But yeah, I do think that the party was not going to abide Joe Biden's family's feelings at this point. They were going to win. They wanted to win. And they were going to, Lord knows what Nancy Pelosi had in planned for him this week had he not relented.
Yeah, I mean that was the thing. There was a statement from Obama last week. You know, I did these marathon things at CNN from New York, and um, I remember this statement from Obama coming out, and people were like, "This, you know, we all know that Biden has this chip on his shoulder about Obama. This is not going to persuade Biden." And I was like, my response was, "Yeah, I think we've moved past the persuade Biden phase." And
Yeah.
the people that this thing is aimed at are like the Congressional Black Caucus to get them to stop telling Biden
Yeah.
they've got his back. And like, and it was clear that the pincer movement of Pelosi and Obama was going to make it an offer to stay on Godfather, an offer Biden couldn't refuse at some point, right? So it was less do what's in the interest of your party, and instead this is happening to you, so do what's in your interest as a human being. You can leave with some dignity or no dignity, but you're going to go. And I think that's the feeling I got, was like someone called Biden and said, "This is what's happening this week. Blame it on the polls if you want. You know, blame it on anything you want. We're gonna give you a fantastic gold watch at the convention, but like now's the time to jump off before Nancy Pelosi does a press conference."
Right. Because on Friday, so first it was we have to get him through the NATO summit.
Yeah,
Let him host, be the leader of the free world, host the NATO summit. Really important. Then he thought his press conference, which I thought he did pretty well in, was going.
yeah, we're grading on a real low bar,
Yeah,
but yes, I agree.
hey,
I
but
agree.
you know what? I'm going to die on this hill. Trump couldn't have given that press conference and answered those questions about the different conflicts around the world, the re-weaponization of NATO, any of that. He could not have talked about that. So there is Biden chuckling and giggling, knowing that he's getting through it, and he thinks he's bought himself more time. It was already too late. The party had turned on him. It was too late. Didn't matter at any point at that point forward what interviews he was going to do with 360 Squeaky or whatever the hell that guy's name is, or Lester Holt or anyone. It was over. And so then they were still giving him the, like, you get to do this on your terms. And when he wouldn't, I mean, it was clear Friday night, Sherrod Brown, Martin Heinrich. I mean, by Friday night, it was like, we're giving you the weekend, but so many people came out on Friday.
Yeah.
That it was like, just get ready for Monday if you haven't figured this out by Sunday night. I really think it was going to be, it was like, we gave you a way to leave with dignity. And now since you're not taking it, we're going to publicly abandon you, and it'll be terribly humiliating.
Yeah. It was sort of like there's those old fashioned scales on both sides, weighted on both sides, like the scale of justice thing. And here's a jar of jelly beans, and each jelly bean represents a unit of your dignity.
Yeah.
And every day we're going to take one jelly bean or
Yeah.
two jelly beans off until you get the point about like where this is going to balance out. And so like he clearly would have, it's like there's that famous line about Napoleon that if he had been hit by a cannonball on his way to Russia, he would have been remembered as the greatest liberator and the most successful general in all of human history, right? But that's not how he ended his thing. If Biden had taken your advice 2 years ago, and said, I'm not going to run, and orchestrated a better withdrawal, a better succession thing, how to do the primary and all that kind of stuff, he would have been remembered as one of arguably the greatest one-term president. And I say this as someone who doesn't buy that his accomplishments make him such a great president, but he would have accomplished the thing of beating Trump and being the bridge and doing the things Democrats wanted him to do, and yada, yada, yada. And it would be very hard to spin his presidency other than Afghanistan as this massive failure. And
we're not in the same place. I would say, having watched the Congress all this time, that what Joe Biden did with no math and no margin in both chambers, either because of him or in spite of him, getting Republicans to cross the aisle in the Senate to give him filibuster-proof majorities for 6 or 7 consequential pieces of legislation that were unthinkable in the Trump or Obama administrations. Unthinkable. Codification of same-sex marriage, PACT Act for Veterans Health Care, the CHIPS Act, the bipartisan infrastructure every president has frothed over but never done, the electoral count update, first gun reform in 30 years, and unites the West against Vladimir Putin. I actually think it's a huge, um, a huge record.
Yeah,
And
I'm not disputing that. Like, like if you're a Democrat or you like a lot of the policies and all that kind of stuff, that case can be made that it was that he had a lot of wins. And I'm not disputing he had a lot of wins. I don't like. I mean, other than the
yeah,
Ukraine thing
yeah,
and a couple other things, I don't actually like the substance of it. Right, and
okay,
I think that I don't think he's responsible for inflation. I think he made inflation worse. I think the we can get into the weeds on some of the policy stuff, but I agree on the scorecard of getting stuff done in Washington. It's pretty impressive, and I think that's a totally fair thing. My only point is that that record would have shined a lot brighter if he
of
had stayed to this I'm going to be a bridge guy and and left the scene as this elder statesman of the party who could kibitz where he wanted. um but that was not to be. All right, so we are recording this on Tuesday morning. I don't know if they've actually used the wax seal in the coronation ceremony, but they did announce this morning that she now has enough delegates pledged to her that she will get the nomination, right? So, like, the whole idea of a rapid primary thing or somebody running against her just to toughen her up, that's all gone by the wayside. I think that's a shame. Both, even if she still ended up winning, I think she would have been better for her. They were making it was weird. They were making those noises saying they don't want it to be a coronation while they were making the phone calls to make it a coronation. And I'm not sure what the thinking there was. So I think she's a much better candidate than Joe Biden, has a much better shot of winning than Joe Biden. I don't think she's the best candidate. Where do you come down on all this?
So, I have made clear many times that I thought it should be like Whitmer Warnock or, other combinations. But having been through whatever we've been through since Sunday afternoon, I do see why they made the calculation that in 16 remaining weeks, in a moment of real heat and potential further division within the coalition, they just had to do this.
Yeah.
And what surprised me was the response. So I did not know that she would reach young voters. I did not know that she would energize Black voters the way that we saw yesterday. So I don't think anybody knew that. And so now I am admitting that, maybe she is. Maybe she is because maybe she creates new vote. Now, Jonah, I don't know if this country will elect a non-white woman. I have watched focus groups that Sarah Longwell has done recently since the debate, where we have seen non-white women in the focus groups say the country is not going to elect a non-white woman president. So that's a risk. At the same time, if we see from this incredible reaction with the money and the volunteer signups and everything else that's going on, that she creates new vote that Biden couldn't get and Trump couldn't get, then I'm willing to be surprised and say maybe she was the right candidate all along, the best candidate that they could run all along. I don't know what's going to happen, but yesterday really surprised me.
Yeah.
Really, I was blown away by, that I have the data here. She's raised nearly $250 million all told 1.1 million unique donors, 62% of them new. The DSCC, the Senate candidates, tripled their small dollar record. They tripled their best small dollar day ever. And the number last night was 28,000 new volunteers in swing states, which was more than 100 times their best day. But now the number I see is 58,000 new volunteers in swing states. I mean, this was beyond, I think, any Democrat's imagination.
Yeah.
So what that tells me is that it's probably not all young and non-white vote. It's probably a lot of anti-Trump that was just unwilling to support Biden. And again, she could lose. There's a lot of problems. The Biden administration has screwed up immigration. It is a bipartisan issue. You can look at polling. Independents and Democrats join with Republicans in picking this as one of their top issues in a lot of polls. It is a disaster. It is a huge liability. I have no idea how she'll answer that question. But on every other front, she has closed the enthusiasm gap, become a candidate of change in a change election, become the candidate of normalcy, become the candidate of the future, flipped the frame on Trump, which was strength and weakness. Biden weak, Trump strong. Strong always wins. Like what Bill Clinton said, strong and wrong will always beat weak and right. Now it's future past. And Trump is shitting his diaper.
Yeah. No, look, I mean, I didn't anticipate this kind of response. And I always framed it as she's not a lock to be the nominee if Biden steps down. But obviously, she's the one you bet on, right? I mean, like, she is the most favored to do it. What I did not anticipate, and I kind of feel stupid about it, and I got to give her props for this, is the way in which everyone, all the possible contenders, that list of, Pritzker and Beshears and Shapiro and yada, 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 Whitmer, in that weird gray period of, oh my gosh, this is happening, they didn't want to be the one to get in the way of the momentum. They don't want to risk being the one blamed for Harris losing, right? Which was always the reason why nobody challenged Biden in the first place. It was this terror of being responsible for Trump winning that, and then the thing I give credit to Harris about is, like, they immediately started leaking, changing the buzz to, like, who her VP pick would be.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, all those guys were like, oh crap, if I challenge her, I'm definitely not going to be the VP pick. and if she loses, I'm not going to be blamed for it. But if I'm the VP, that's better than, what I'm doing now. And that dynamic just happened really, really fast. And so she's the nominee. I agree with you. Look, I think she has a good shot at beating Trump for, all the reasons that you list. And also, she's, people keep saying, well, she's a weak candidate and she's got these problems and nobody likes her and she's never had a competitive race. And I think all of those things are true. But in a race that was so unbelievably tight, when people thought that Joe Biden was non-compos mentis, and they were saying, yeah, I'll vote for the invalid, over Trump no matter what. In that kind of tight race, like, being able to actually make an argument to respond to, to the other side and campaign, like, just actually go out and campaign, which Biden couldn't do. Everyone seemed to sort of forget that Biden couldn't campaign. I mean, yeah, you can give one speech a day, going around kind of thing. And there's always that terror that he's going to say something horrible or fall or whatever. But Kamala Harris can go around and actually be more energetic than Trump, because Trump's not a very energetic candidate. People think he's an energetic candidate, but he doesn't give a lot of rallies. And so I think, if right now, I think I would bet on Harris winning. I'm not sure I would bet a lot, but it feels like that's the way it's going to go.
I think she's probably still the underdog. Again, I don't think she's going to change the minds of men who will never vote for a woman or a Democratic woman. But the unknown now is creating the new vote, right? Trump's votes are locked in, and energizing the anti-Trump vote with the white man governor who she's going to pick from, wherever. whether it's Bashir or Shapiro. I don't think she's going to pick Mark Kelly. I really think that once you have that pair of people in their 50s saying, like, we're looking to tomorrow, we're done with the past, I just think that's tough. The other thing that's interesting about the opinion of her is I got to bring up Sarah's focus groups again because it's fascinating. People's instant response is like, I don't like her. But then they go like, but I don't really know like what she's done. So she definitely has some opportunity. I mean, Harry Enton on CNN this morning said nearly 1/5 of the electorate has no opinion of her. So, right. So room to grow is a good thing. However, if the Republicans succeed in defining her before she defines herself, like that's, that could be bad. But again, she has opportunity. I think, right? I think she has opportunity with the VP pick. She has opportunity because people don't really know who she is. And then yesterday she was far more confident and warm and relaxed than anyone has ever seen her, which means maybe she just sucked at being number 2. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you talk to people who were staff for her. I mean, like, she's going to have some stumbles. I mean, for sure.
No, I think we need to get it out right now. She treats staff badly. This is a problem. It is documented. There are the numbers. It's the problem that AB Klobuchar had. It's a real thing. There will be hits on her. I don't know who they hit with. You know what I'm saying? I don't know who looks at this moment and says, I want a sentient being in their 50s. It's time to move on. I don't know if you get that person to worry about her foreign policy credentials versus Trump's. You see, so it's like hard for me to know where these arguments are going to go with the tiny group of people who decide elections and don't follow this at all.
Yeah. So my Sarah Isger, she made a good point the other night. We're talking about the biggest problems, biggest strengths that Harris has. And she said, I can't remember the exact phrasing of it, but the point she made was that part of the problem that you get with the way Biden did this is you had about 3 weeks, a month, where a whole bunch of undecided people, like anti-Trump people, but didn't like when you gave them permission to say out loud and convince themselves it's okay to vote for Trump. And, the sort of Nikki Haley voters, they had this month of, well, everyone I know is voting for Trump and Biden. I can't vote for Biden now because look at him and this is terrible. I guess I'm going to vote for Trump. And the sky didn't fall. And people said, yeah, me too. And that created, again, among a tiny subset of people, but it created this sort of permission structure to vote for Trump that was not necessary. If Biden had withdrawn or not run again, people would not have gone through that process.
But is it permanent?
Who knows? But it's one of the things we have learned in the last 8 years on all sorts of issues and at all sorts of scale and scope. It gets easier for people to do what they thought was unthinkable the more they do it, right? I mean, it's like I always, whenever I'm offered, or I shouldn't say whenever, when I refuse a glazed donut, my position is always it's easiest to say no to the first one.
Yeah.
Right. And lots of people have, I mean, just look at JD Vance, who we should turn to in a second. A lot of things he says now, a lot of things he's very comfortable saying now, he never would have dreamed saying 5 years ago. And I know a lot of red-pilled voters who were with me on the anti-Trump stuff, and then over time they just get worn down. And once you go through that turnstile psychologically, I think for a lot of people, it's really hard to go back through it. And so I'm not saying, all I'm saying is when we're talking about the small numbers of people here, I do think that that's one of the problems that Biden introduced into this by dragging his heels on all of this, is he allowed this idea to fester through the Republican convention. And that gave people who otherwise weren't giving themselves permission to think about voting Trump, permission to vote Trump.
Well, we're going to watch the polls. It'll be very interesting to see. Trump's approval is up because he got shot. A lot of unknowns. We have a lot of known unknowns, right? That we're
Right.
looking at right now that are going to determine what goes into the polling 10 days, 2 weeks from now on Harris versus Trump. But I also, again, I think that if she picks a VP soon, and there's like two normal people who look like they're charging ahead into the future compared to Trump, I don't know that people who thought that it was an organized convention and it was time to go with Trump because he was president once and things cost less, and he was shot and they feel badly, and he responded with love and everything. If you became a Trump voter like 2 weeks ago, I don't know that. I don't
I'm
know.
not saying it's locked in.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
right. But it makes the persuasion to bring them back harder.
Yeah, it's just such a volatile atmosphere, and yesterday surprised me so much.
Yeah.
That I think there's more like churn than we realize. Maybe it goes. Maybe like you said. Maybe some people go to Trump and then they stay there. But I think those numbers are really small compared to probably the new vote that she's going to get. Things can happen. She could have a real problem down the road with a ceasefire, and she's at odds with Biden over I mean, so many things could happen where the energy in her coalition erodes, and then that leaves her at a disadvantage, because Trump's coalition is so locked in.
Right.
But right now she has new vibe.
Oh, I agree with that. I totally agree with that.
Wild.
But new vibe eventually dissipates.
It's a honeymoon.
So
yeah.
So all right. It's really kind of difficult to cram in all that's happened in the last month, and I haven't talked to you for longer than that. But like, what did you think of the JD Vance pick?
So I was surprised. I thought that Trump was going to want to go with. I went around and around and around. I thought originally he has to pick a woman. Then I was like, what am I thinking? He's never going to pick a woman. And in the end, I couldn't believe it that people were talking about Burgum and they were leaking stories about him because they wanted him to get his rich friends to give money. And so they were doing Bergmentum and leaking it to journalists months ago. And I laughed at it. And I literally landed on Burgum because I decided that Trump's pathologies would prevent him from picking someone like Rubio, who would make him look, who was going to be smarter and more impressive and ranking on Senate intelligence and, doing the Spanish language commercials. And that was just going to be, it was hard for me to see it. And I felt the same way about Vance, that Vance was going to really kind of just be maybe too exciting and too intellectual. And then what I've seen of Vance since has made me realize that Vance, is ready to contort himself into any position for power. And so now he's beta, and he had a bad day yesterday on the stump, and everyone's making fun of him. And I'm sure Trump is furious, and he can't outshine Trump. So he's like low energy, smirky guy, and it's not going so well. But yeah, I was surprised. I thought he was going to pick Burgum to reassure people, here's this nice, calm Midwest governor that I have who is ready to step into the presidency at any moment. And look, suburban moms, I'm not that crazy. Of course, he'll like keep everything stable in second Trump's term. I just didn't. The vote of the pick of Vance is so like cocky, right? It's like, I'm so winning that I can pick JD Vance just to continue to juice like the bro vote or whatever, the base. And those are my thoughts. And I was really surprised to see JD Vance just like bomb yesterday.
Yeah. So I since this is kind of a I told you so episode of The Remnant, I will say that on Saturday, or we recorded Friday evening. I do this Chris Wallace show a lot, and
Yeah.
at the end we're supposed to make a prediction or make some under the radar thing because people are scared of making predictions, and I don't like making predictions. But anyway, I predicted that JD Vance is going to have a much rockier rollout than people think he will
Oh,
because he's got very little. I mean, it's a similar criticism of Harris, but far more intense. He has a very little electoral experience, and he didn't. He won in Ohio, underperforming the Republican governor by double digits.
who's like a
And
hated rhino, which is hilarious.
that's right. So it just shows his appeal is much narrower than the maximum Republican appeal, right? And he underperformed Trump in a state that, Trump won that state by 8 points and he won like by 5.5 or 6 points or something like that. Again, different years and all that. But my point is that he appeals to a narrower slice of the party than a generic Republican does. Never mind, and with very little evidence that he has this cross-party appeal of any kind, right? And now I understand the Trump people will say, well, that's because he's trying to appeal to these low propensity voters, the ones who are into UFC and all that kind of stuff. And I think he's a bad pick for that too. I mean, he's not like the dudes who spend all their time playing Call of Duty don't really know who JD Vance is, and they don't really care. And the sort of the voters that like Roger Stone loves, the sort of
Yeah.
finger sniffing incel Nazi kids. Those guys hate Vance because he's got a lovely and talented immigrant, a daughter of immigrant's wife, an Asian wife, and so I just don't think he expands anything, and he doesn't have natural political gifts the way a lot of his super fans, including some very close friends of mine. This is the first person on any ticket with whom I have like 2 dozen friends who are like friends of his. So it's just a little weird for me. And they tell me how talented and brilliant he is. I don't dispute that the guy is smart.
Right.
I just don't think he's ready for a national political campaign. And so it's been interesting to sort of watch. And the best evidence, I thought, the most glaring evidence that he's not quite ready for prime time was how crappy his speech was.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that JD Vance is such a skilled performer, BSer, that if he wanted to appeal to swing voters right now, he could put on a whole new skin and be, look, we just want peace and prosperity. We really want to get along with our neighbors. Everybody just wants to have a fighting chance. Inflation is crushing everybody. We just want to stay out of wars. He could go on CNN every single Sunday like he did for the last year to get this job and say something completely different. And I think he'd probably pick up more vote than whatever he's doing with this, I'm just the pissed off bro guy, which is what I guess they're dispatching him to do. So it is really interesting. It's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I just like with his speech, a politician who'd been around the block a few times would say, I know what a good speech is, and this isn't it. Right. And he was just like, I'm not saying he has to be a great speechwriter. I mean, I think he's a pretty good writer, but like, there's an art to a convention speech. I mean, and it doesn't have to be very cerebral or intellectual, but the inability to convert his life story into an exciting speech. I mean, you go back and you look at Sarah Palin's convention speech, and Sarah Palin, I think in retrospect, we can all agree was flawed, but that thing lit that room on fire.
Yeah, I was there and it was crazy. Yeah.
I mean, just on fire.
Yeah.
And like, Vance does not have that kind of charisma with big audiences, and it's gonna show.
But Jonah, maybe he can't have any charisma because he can't overshadow Trump.
Yeah. I mean, which is a reason not to pick him.
Exactly.
Because people are expecting charisma from him because he's that candidate. He's supposed to be this exciting game changer, MAGA world created candidate, and then he doesn't really bring any heat that is attractive. Then don't don't pick him. Make him, Secretary of Defense or something.
I think he's in a real hole because he needs to stay flat. And
Yeah.
that's not going to help. And look, the truth is, you and I have watched this a long time. Like, Americans are not going to follow the process vote about how it isn't fair, man, that they ruled out Joe Biden and picked another candidate before the primary. It's not democratic. Like, people are going to go on their gut, right? A lot of this is gut. Usually the person that you want to have a beer with wins the election, whatever. Like, this is, JD Vance needs to be charming to help Trump. And It's clear that feels that he can't be. And I'm laughing because if you want to work for a sociopath, go at it. But like, now it seems like a really strange decision.
Yeah. And it's going to be wild if Trump loses, which, my comments earlier about how if I had to bet right now, I'd bet on Harris, which I stand by, but like, I could also totally open to seeing the ground shift back, regression to the mean. It just, there's so much churn in the data the last 30 days that it's probably the stupidest thing to do is make any straight line bet about anything right now. But what's going to be just amazeballs, to use a term from social science, is when Trump loses, or if Trump loses and he blames JD Vance for it. It's going to be just wild.
But how can he blame JD Vance if he loses to a non-white woman, Jonah? He's going to have to say it was stolen. And the whole party's going to say it was stolen.
Of course, they're going to say all that. But there's going to be, I guarantee you, if he loses, there's going to be reporting from inside Trump world about how Vance screwed it up, in part because it's in the incentive structure of a whole bunch of people trying to attach themselves to the next candidate, DeSantis or whoever, to sort of crap all over Vance and say it wasn't me. This is all Don Jr. and all that kind of stuff. But I just want to make this point because I think we're both recovering fans of Tucker Carlson, and the whole idea, like the Vance boosters had these really complicated, intricate, sophisticated theories about why this was such a brilliant pick, and it's going to do all of these things, and we're going to connect the Frankfurt to the Queen Astray, and vests have no sleeves, and don't you understand? And then you read the reporting about how the decision was made, and Trump basically had settled on Burgum. Don Jr. threw one of his Adderall fits and said, "You're going crazy. What's wrong with you? That's so effing stupid," and threw a tantrum. And then you find out that maybe it had to do with the fact that Elon Musk was going to give $45 million a month to a super PAC if you pick Vance. And then maybe it was the fact that Tucker called and said, you have to pick Vance. And Tucker told, according to Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, Tucker told Trump, you can't pick Rubio because he's a neocon. And neocons only want to get us into nuclear war, which is totally, that's just true. I mean, that's all Irving Kristol really cared about was global thermonuclear war. And, Seymour Martin Lipset, if he used to say, why even bother doing political science if you can't turn the planet into a smoldering radioactive cinder? I mean, that's just what they want to do, right? But anyway, put that out of the side. He then said, also, if you pick Rubio, because he's a neocon, that will give the American intelligence agencies and the national security complex in the United States the permission they need, the incentive they need to assassinate you. And Trump's listening to this stuff, right? And who knows what was the tipping point thing of all of these things. None of these things suggest some multi-dimensional theory about the electorate and about, some grand strategery thing. This is all crazy people in a bunker saying crazy things, or multi-billionaires offering quasi bribes to do what they want. This is not evidence that Vance was this incredibly thought out pick through regression analysis and, running the traps on every possible eventuality. It's just the chaos of the Trump universe extending into a VP pick.
I think you're right. And I think that Trump, first of all, doesn't believe that he needs a vice president.
Right.
He's made that clear. And he didn't want to be bothered. So why not have a good bro, attack dog, base juicer, whatever he thought he was going to be. He thinks that he's handsome like central casting. He got over the fact that he has a beard, even though he's not a beard guy, but both his sons have grown beards. And it is, I'm sure it's, I mean, JD Vance is 40 years younger than Trump, but looks younger than that. So that was probably a hurdle, but he must have just decided, like, I have this election in the bag, and this guy's just frosting. It just doesn't matter. And he said on CNN months ago that Mike Pence never should have certified the election and that they should have brought alternate electors to the Congress to have a full-fledged constitutional crisis conflagration, the likes of which we've never seen. So in a way, it's like, right, what does Trump want, right? He wants central casting. He wants someone who's going to destroy the constitutional order. Game.
Yeah. I mean, or is willing to on Trump's behalf, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's the loyalty thing. And that's the depressing thing about it is that, all of the politicians, all the Republicans who said, we can wait this out, right? We can kick the can. Pelosi will take care, Democrats will take care of Trump. He's going to lose anyway, blah, 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 blah. All the McConnells and Nikki's and DeSantis's and all these people who, although, they get less blame than others, but there's a whole idea of we can play footsie with this guy until we replace him. Miss the fact that you wait long enough and a whole generation of politicians will grow up thinking that the Trumpian GOP is normal, and they'll be products of it. And Vance is the most intellectual of that, Madison Cawthorn, universe of Trumpified politicians, but he's not going to be the last of them. And it points out once again that doing the right thing early forestalls the fecal festivals that, will follow if you keep trying to put it off.
Yeah. But the idea also that, I mean, I guess some people, their theory, right, of him going into parking him in Pennsylvania and him juicing everyone in the Rust Belt is that, like, some non-politically engaged voters will think that JD Vance is the future, and that's exciting, and that he'll be groomed on day one to be the next president in 2028 when we know that he will not be.
Yeah.
Maybe that's on the margins, like, works that people are like, oh, we can get past Trump. And I'm a conservative, I'm a populist or whatever, but I think Trump's a little wacky and he's past his expiration date. But this guy now, he's really going to be like the president, right? He's going to be groomed every day to take over in just a few years.
Yeah.
And that's not true, but maybe some people will believe that.
I should say, since you brought up Vance's thing about how he argued that Pence should have done this whole, caddy day at the Bushwood Country Club, but with the Constitution thing. It does put a spotlight on the absolute whining pissiness of complaining about the Democrats' process here, right? It's undemocratic. Yeah. They're negating, primary voters. It's like, dude, you celebrated January 6th and said Trump should have gotten away with it. Like, spare me your, panty bunching dudgeon about, undemocratic processes,
It is amazing. And Mike Johnson is just going to run around and talk about suing over this ballot access. And they don't know, they really don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But again, the January 6th party talking about a coup on democracy is really really sweet.
My legal counsel, Sarah Esger, says that if Biden had been nominated, if he actually got the nomination, there'd be a lot of substance to the ballot access stuff.
Yeah, but not now.
But now it's not even a legal fiction. It's just a fiction that, like, this stuff is, nothing's going to happen to that in any court. All right, very quickly, I know you got to go. You've been very generous with your time. Did you buy that Trump was a changed man because of the assassination attempt? Did you have a moment of doubt about it?
I believe that a near-death experience definitely jolts you, no matter what. And so I did believe when he interviewed with Selena Zito and he was like, I shouldn't be here. Like, I'm lucky to be alive or whatever. I think that's real. But I think the whole, he's going to unite the country was total BS. They wanted to unite the party, and that's what they did in Milwaukee. And then he went from Truth Social posts about basking in the love of the Almighty as one country, to like talking about witch hunts again and crazy old Joe and lying Kamala and all his um, bad shittery. So no, I didn't expect that to change at all.
Yeah, so I wrote about this last week, but like I thought I was very skeptical. But then for the first 3 nights of the convention, it was a disciplined, good convention with a couple, outliers. The Peter Navarro speech was something else. That was sort of like Florida man throwing an alligator through the drive-through window kind of convention speech. But and he had been disciplined. He had stayed out of the limelight while Biden's troubles manifested, and so like even before the assassination attempt, there was something going on there, which both of those things spoke to the professionalism of his campaign. But the fact that Trump was willing to let his campaign manage him was itself sort of a sign, could be evidence that he had changed in some way. And then the first 30 minutes, 25 minutes of his convention speech, which were disciplined to, he has this thing about using fifth grader vocabulary, but like once you get over that, you're like, oh my gosh, he maybe he's a changed man. And so I was relieved, not in the way the Democrats are, and by the nut jobbery, the extra 9,000 words he added to the prepared script, because if you actually paid attention to the prepared remarks, he wasn't changed in the idea that he was humble. He was that what they wanted you to believe was that those memes of Jesus guiding his hand at the Resolute desk are real, and that he was spared and anointed by God to be God's instrument on earth. And that's why he didn't die that day. And like, that's not a great, that is not encouraging to me, to have the most arrogant and narcissistic politician of our lifetimes actually be able to take it to 11 by him being self-convinced that now he can do no wrong because he's God's instrument. And so I was kind of glad to discover, okay, he doesn't actually believe any of that. That was all just stuff to say. He just wants to do his Borscht Belt shtick. And that's reassuring to me, right? It's like it's weird to think, like I've been saying for 10 years or 8 years now, demography is destiny. He can't change. Waiting for him to pivot to be presidential is like waiting for Godot. And then I was like, oh my gosh, he's changed, but I think he's changed for the worse, because now he thinks he's Joan of Arc. And to find out he actually doesn't believe that was I was relieved.
I agree with you. At the same time, I do think that Trump, before someone attempted to take his life, believed that he is some kind of chosen gets away with everything guy.
For sure.
So that remains. But yeah.
But he thought about it as just like, he's so awesome, right? It wasn't
right.
Because like, I mean, remember, this is a guy
he doesn't believe in God, so
right.
I'm good with that. Yeah.
Right. But like, all of a sudden believing God's real and God agrees with Trump about his own opinion of himself.
But who took the life of a firefighter behind him who
was
protecting his own daughter. So yeah, it's a little screwed up. But that talk made everyone feel good at the convention, who are already faithful and passionate members of the cult. But outside of the arena, that doesn't work on swing voters, that kind of, oh, Trump has been changed and he definitely was chosen. And I mean,
so I got to let you go. I don't want to.
It was great to be with you, Jonah. Just wonderful.
We all love you here, and but I do gotta ask. So, since you were right about the Biden stuff, Is there anything you want to predict? Say what's going to happen next? Do you want to lay any markers down?
I just really hope she picks Josh Shapiro. Just really hope. That is my great hope. Please pick Josh Shapiro.
I would like that as well. And I like it because I think he's great. He's a very impressive Democrat. I think he's better than Bashir, who gets he gets plussed up a grade because he has the last name Bashir in the state of Kentucky. But Shapiro is really pretty impressive. Also, I will say, I think it will annoy a lot of people who don't like the Jews, and I would find that entertaining.
For me, after the year that we've been through, the almost year, I actually having a really popular governor who is Jewish come in and speak to both the conflict, the war in Gaza, and anti-Semitism in this country, and speak to the center of the electorate about it would be amazing. I really want that. I see it as a strength, not a risk. I really, really think he is just, he's a real leader, and he's so not slick, and it just comes across as so real. So yeah, that's my hope, not my prediction.
All right, A.B. Stoddard, we will have you back. And we all love you, and thank you again, and congratulations on your prowess of prognostication.
It wasn't difficult.